Hello and welcome to the big picture. The provisions of the Prevention of Corruption Act have always invited a lot of debate among people in government and officials. The Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has revived the debate again by stating that there is a need to review and amend the Act. He says that the provisions of Section 13 of the Act especially has been a great deterrent for effective functioning of government functionaries and officials. Incidentally, it is under these provisions that former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, as well as former Coal Secretary P.C. Parakh and industrialist Kumar Mangalam Birla find themselves facing charges. Meanwhile, many other officials across the country have been facing charges under these provisions. So have these provisions actually deterred decision making in the government, and is there a need to amend them? What will be the impact of such amendments in fighting corruption? We will discuss all this today with P.P. Rao, Senior Advocate in the Supreme Court, T.S.R. Subramanian, former Cabinet Secretary, K.T.S. Tulsi, Senior Advocate and a Rajya Sabha member, Balwinder Singh, former Special Director, CBI, and Sanjay Kapoor, Editor, Hard News. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Subramanian, do you agree that these provisions of the Prevention of Corruption Act has been hindering decision making, has been some kind of a threat on the government officials?
No, firstly, I feel that these, rightly or wrongly, for whatever reason, have been thoroughly ineffective in stopping corruption in India. It's rampant in center, rampant in the even more worse in the states. Number one, it has failed per se, number one. Number two, there are many honest government servants, but there are also, unfortunately, a growing number of dishonest government servants who tango with ministers. Number two. Number three, I don't think any law has inhibited people from taking decisions. I've always seen, if your mind is clear, if you write clearly what you are saying, without, even if you may turn out to be wrong, nobody will question you. The only questions come in ambiguous areas where later the facts turn out to be different. I don't think the laws are going to make too much difference in terms of any change and tweaking of the law, etc. I'm not saying the present law is perfect. I'm not saying that. But changing of the law is not going to be anywhere significant. It's a question of the ambience and the ethos and the way the system functions. If you start using the law for hitting people, like CBI or the CBCIDs, etc., then any law can be abused. But I don't see the connection today between the PC Act and level of corruption in the country and quality decision making. I see a total disconnect in these things.
You don't see any connection?
I see a total disconnect in all these things.
But the finance minister says that this Section 13, some provisions of the Section 13 has been a deterrent for effective government functioning.
That may be his perception. I'm not quite so sure. He probably knows better. Things have changed probably in the last 15 years, probably for the better. I'm not sure how many people will agree, but maybe things have changed for the better.
Okay. Mr. Rao? Mr. Rao, how do you look at this? Because there have been several honest government officials across the country who are facing charges under these provisions of Prevention of Corruption Act. If you talk to their colleagues and people who have known them, they say that they couldn't have done this. We are seeing this happening even in the coal scam case where one of the top officials, former coal secretary, is facing charges. So would you agree with the finance minister's assessment that these provisions have been a deterrent?
I am not able to appreciate how the finance minister says that this is a deterrent, for the reason that the law is very clear right from the inception, even under the old Act. This is the 1988 Act. Earlier we had 1947 Act. The Supreme Court has interpreted it to mean only dishonest acts will attract the penalty under this Act, not honest acts. In fact, the court has also given an illustration. Suppose a public servant makes the recommendation in favor of somebody for appointment. Does it automatically attract the Prevention of Corruption Act? Because it is a recommendation to appoint him, irrespective of the rules, whatever it is. The court says no. Such innocuous actions will not amount to corruption at all. And therefore, I do not think, and then I wish the finance minister was more articulate to indicate what kind of changes he wanted in the Act. I am not able to get that in his interview. So I think this cannot be a reason. Other reasons can be there for amending it. There is a need for amend the Act because even the very tight-lipped Act Prevention of Corruption is a misnomer. The Act has not prevented any corruption. Even after the Act, corruption has increased and it is unabated. So the other experts have suggested various measures to be taken in order to make it a tight Act, a more effective Act. And for that, you see, we have to take other measures. And also, I have been suggesting for a long time one particular measure. I said, make a provision in the Constitution to relieve a person of doubtful integrity, public servant of doubtful integrity, immediately from his position. If you don't do that, it's very difficult to contain this corruption. Second thing I have been suggesting is, while recruiting people, you must tighten the rules of recruitment so that only persons who are of impeccable honesty are recruited to the public services. Unless we tighten the two things, it is very difficult to control this particular malaise of corruption. So to my mind, the finance minister's thinking is not very clear, and he is to be more articulate precisely what he wants. As the law stands, honest acts are not at all punishable under the Act. Recently, only a couple of years back, former Minister Jafar Sharif's case came to the Supreme Court. He took some more extra hands when he was a railway minister. He went for surgery, heart surgery. He took some extra stuff which is not permitted by the rules. That was held to be corruption, and then charges were payment against him.
Right.
But Supreme Court said, no, this is not a dishonest act, therefore this cannot be called corruption. Therefore, honest acts are not punishable. That's my view.
Okay. Mr. Tulsi, would you agree with Mr. Rao? Or do you think that the finance minister has a point and that there is the need for a relook?
I agree with Mr. Rao and Mr. Subramaniam both. I don't think that there is any change that you can bring about which will then embolden the civil servants to be able to put down their views in writing in their notes. If at all there is a problem in that, it's the RTI Act and not the Prevention of Corruption Act. And I think that by mere change in the law, you achieve nothing, not even by changing the name, because it's like rearranging furniture. We need to ensure that criminal justice is delivered within a reasonable time. That means within 6 months or maximum a year. The legislature has said it many a times, but it's taking more and more time. If it's going to take 20 years or 30 years for the case to be decided, obviously any law will become draconian, because you are going to take a lifetime to be able to say as to whether you are innocent or guilty. The problem is with criminal justice system, not with Prevention of Corruption Act.
Okay, that's interesting. Mr. Balwinder Singh, the problem is that, of course, the CBI handles cases of Prevention of Corruption Act mostly, and they are the ones who deal with these cases, and officials get involved in this, get caught in this, and many officials feel that the CBI is unable to really appreciate the actions of the officers concerned, especially the senior officers in the government of India or any state governments. They say that the CBI has this tendency to look at this act and not understand the actions of the officials.
I think this is actually an area where a lot of controversy has been on, not from yesterday, but for many years.
Right.
Now, there's a section 13(1)(d). This section has 3 clauses.
Right.
First 2 clauses very clearly mention that if somebody, a public servant, causes undue pecuniary advantage either to himself or somebody else, either by corrupt or illegal means or fraudulently,
right,
then he is liable for punishment. As far as section 13(1)(d) subclause 3 is concerned, that is the area where the problem arises. This says that while holding office as a public servant, if he obtains for himself or for somebody any valuable thing or pecuniary advantage, he is liable. Now, this section is very, very wide. This clause is very, very wide. In any case, as Mr. Subramaniam, Mr. Tulsi and Mr. Rao has said, act has to be dishonest. That is a basic principle of criminal jurisprudence, that there has to be mens rea and bad intention. But interpretation of that intention through circumstances,
and in this kind of
people differ. Now,
no, in this
CBI,
this particular section which you have mentioned, 13(1)(d)(3), it gives scope for wide variety of interpretation of by the officers of the CBI,
by the officers, by the courts.
By the courts.
Now, when it comes to that, I am taking an opinion which is not the mainstream opinion of CBI. I am no longer with CBI. But I find that number of times very honest, competent officers consult a lot of experts on interpreting that evidence. We do call experts as witnesses. Say the matter pertains to telecom, matter pertains to certain public procurement or any other issue. Experts are called, their evidence is recorded, and then we try to interpret whether the act is motivated by malified considerations or it is a case of misjudgment, or in hindsight, because loss has been caused, we are looking at it as a case of corruption. And opinions do differ on this, both within the investigating agencies as well as within the courts. So you will find frequently judgments varying from one to the other. So now, ultimately, a person may be acquitted or discharged. But the very process of going through the justice delivery system from investigation to prosecution is a very painful process because it takes very long time in this country. So I have a feeling there is need for very, very careful drafting of this provision. So to that extent, I agree with Mr. Arun Jaitley that without diluting anti-corruption law, there is need for very clear drafting of this provision. And this is really required in a large number of cases. We have two provisions which give some sort of filtration as far as prosecution, frivolous or vexatious prosecution is concerned. One was prior permission to register a case.
Exactly.
Other is sanction for prosecution. These were meant for ensuring that honest people do not suffer.
Right.
Now about that also questions are raised. I think there's real need to look at anti-corruption law very carefully. I have seen the laws in other countries. They have gone far ahead and they have a series of punishments, including deferred prosecution by civil liability. For example, Siemens have been punished $1 billion and the prosecution is deferred by their courts. So there are a series of experiments being done all over the world.
We can look at other...
We should look at other...
We should look at it. Yes. Sanjay?
You know, I want to go back to the context of Mr. Arun Jaitley's suggestion that the law has to be changed in some ways. He was actually talking about the disinvestment, how much money is going to be raised. And it was in that context he referred whether the bureaucrats would be comfortable with that.
In fact, in that context, he pointed out that the CBI is still investigating and prosecuting 1998 to 2004.
So all the, if you remember the strategic sale of public sector assets that had taken place, and some of those sales really rankle. I mean, a hotel property was sold for a song for about 8 crores. Some other major sales took place. I still remember the BSNL tower, which is there. That was also sold to a big company. So when there is a very disruptive policy issue which happens, where you have bureaucrats who are part of it, and I don't know whether they question some of these decisions, then I think those kind of questions are being raised, whether a decision like that had been taken properly, whether the public sector, the public property was evaluated properly or not. And similarly, I think it travels down to even the coal scam or sale of spectrum and all that. And where I don't think there is clarity about whether the policy was taken in public interest or there was corporate or crony capitalists actually stepping in and twisting the policy. So there may be, in a very basic way, some kind of clarity about whether you have evidence of that nature or not. But when it comes to changes in policy which happen because you have a big corporate house leaning on the government to bring about those change, they do not reflect in the policy. So if there is a change that has to take place in the policy, not in terms of Section 13(2)(d) that you are suggesting, it has to be grander. It has to be more...
It has to be larger.
Larger, yes.
Mr. Subramaniam, actually, I would like to bring to you one of the senior IAS officers who took voluntary retirement. He has written a very interesting piece about a lady IAS officer who has been arrested by the CBI because she granted renewal of a permit for some mining lease or something like that, which is similar to what has happened in the coal scam. And there the issue is of what is public interest. And apparently public interest has not been defined in any of the laws in a manner in which it can be, it is universal. So there seems to be a problem there. So,
well, look,
see, as a bureaucrat, what do you think is public interest?
Some concepts like happiness, you can't define. There are some things in life you can't define. public interest is something which will really relate to the situation at hand. In fact, 13D3,
13.1D3.
Actually, when you mentioned the concepts of a valuable thing, peculiar advantage, you mentioned public interest. The key issue is public interest.
Absolutely.
Here. And the reality is, you go to state after state, land is alienated, facilities are given, permits are given, all over, and we know so much of dealings take place under the table also, but we can't really, ultimately, till the system is clean from the top. And there's a problem with India today. Center is much better today than it used to be. Unless it is clean from the top. This is strictly not a legal issue. I think Mr. Tulsi has the correct point here. The correct point here is that there's a safeguard. Both Mr. Tulsi and Rao said the courts will look at criminality, they will look at intentions, they will look at dishonesty, they will look at various mens rea basically. But ultimately, the honesty has to come from within the system. This cannot be, a piece of paper cannot replace governance. It's a quality that has to come from the top and permeate down. Unfortunately, it's going down. This kind of a cosmetic change.
He's not going to change.
Look, it is occupational hazard for all of us. I have a case against me by CBI. 20 times I've imported wheat. Somebody wanted to fix me and said it is against public interest, whatever. So the case is still against me. Tomorrow I can go to jail. That's the reality of the situation today. So to some extent, anybody in public life, and I'm not particularly compared to others. So the point is, the system is bad because it has been run badly, but
and you don't
the laws themselves are not to blame. People are more to blame than the laws.
Okay, Mr. Rao. Mr. Rao, in the context of what Mr. Balwinder Singh said, and also in the context of what I was telling Mr. Subramaniam about this article by a senior IAS officer, pointing out that what is public interest is not clearly defined. So would that lead to, harassment or arrest of honest officials who have performed their duty?
Now, public interest is not defined, but it has been illustrated sufficiently by decided cases. So every case the court mentions what is public interest, what is not, the court decides it. That is on such parameters. It is very well settled. An honest difference of opinion does not injure public interest. In fact, civil servants are expected to be very honest and express their opinions boldly with candor. Therefore, there is protection for them. It is not that they will be. But only thing is this, frivolous charges can always be made.
Yes.
But they will not stand, they cannot stick. So therefore, the risk of being charge-sheeted is always there, even for the most honest person. But the safeguard in law is that honest person will not be punished, will not be convicted. Therefore, I wish the Honorable Finance Minister was a little more eloquent about what actually he had in mind, what kind of changes he wanted to bring about. But as it is, the law seems to be that only dishonest person should be punished, no honest public servant should be punished, allowed to be punished. Courts take care of it. But the point is well made by Mr. Tulsi and others that our criminal justice system is so very slow, painfully slow, and ultimately it does not have effect what ultimately happens. In many cases, the conviction rate is very limited, very negligible. So we have to make this law more effective by proper administration. And as Mr. Subramaniam has said, ultimately it comes on the honesty element in every human being, in every public servant. We have to tone up that quality of the public servants. That needs to be done.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Subramaniam.
Only one short point. Dishonesty, normally we look at financial dishonesty. We're not looking at intellectual dishonesty. Ability to look the other way and not see what you are
I don't think the act.
And therefore, when you look at mens rea, you just don't look purely at financial quid pro quo kind of dishonesty financial, but also intellectual dishonesty, which is quite prevalent.
Okay, Mr. Tulsi, let us take the case of the coal scam, which is right now going on. For instance, we are told that the former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was very keen that this section 13(1)D of the Prevention of Corruption Act should be revoked. In fact, there is a bill pending in the Parliament, to amend the Prevention of Corruption Act in 2013. That bill was brought. It has not It has not seen the light of the day so far. You know, in all this context, do you think that at least a relook is necessary?
Well, you know, maybe relook is necessary, but I want to say that we need to understand very clearly that there's a difference between administrative law and criminal law. Public interest is in the domain of administrative law for determining as to whether the action is valid or invalid. But public interest is not for the police officer investigating a corruption case to determine, nor is it for the criminal court to decide as to what decision ought to have been taken. The question is whether the ingredients, essential ingredients of the offense defined under the law are made out. So we need to clearly understand this, and there can be no question of an offense, particularly like that of corruption, which can be made out of bona fide action by a public servant. So therefore, I really think that we need to understand very clearly that public interest is in the field of administrative law, where in a writ petition, the courts can strike down an action. But that is not the basis for prosecution always.
But it has happened. Don't you agree that it has happened that, you know, public interest, even in the cases where Prevention of Corruption Act is evoked, yeah, there are issues of public interest involved, and courts have ordered on this issue, and sometimes it has created a lot of confusion on that.
Well, there are a number of cases where a charge sheet is filed without any basis and they are quashed, and merely because in a case you can't go on tinkering with law on the basis of individual cases.
So you think that, as Mr. Subramanian says, the officers should accept the fact that there is an occupational hazard, and these occupational hazards can continue to harass you for years, like it is happening with Mr. Subramanian himself now?
No, I'm not saying that. Not the second point. That he's right. It must be done quickly. He's right.
Okay, Mr. Balwinder Singh?
No, it should all be decided in a matter of months.
1 second.
The malady with criminal law is, it takes decades.
Okay. Now, Mr. Balwinder Singh, there is one more point which is said by the officers who feel that this law is misused or abused, or you know, the CBI which investigates this case, they don't really understand the administrative aspects of their work.
As I tried to explain earlier, CBI takes a lot of pains to understand the issues. We have dealt, I personally have seen cases right from Harshad Mehta scam, Ketan Parekh, and right up to the recent cases. We take a lot of precautions in understanding the broader picture even before we touch the specifics of the case.
But
we spend a lot of time in understanding those.
After all that, CBI is still accused of misusing or not being able to understand.
Perception about CBI, I cannot go on here because that's not the subject. But I think CBI has been more sinned than what. It's a far, far more expert organization than it is perceived to be, thanks to the media perception. They take tremendous pains in understanding extremely complicated cases of financial crime are all handled by CBI in a very, very professional manner. We have seen judgments. We have seen the type of evidence which is presented. Foreign courts have appreciated those evidences. I think we should not talk too ill of CBI. I'm not saying it's a perfect organization. And at the same time, I would say having a law which gives possibility of vague interpretation is something unsafe. It's a question of reconciling, on one hand, very, very bad state of affairs as far as corruption is concerned. On the other hand, ensuring that honest, well-intentioned public servants, and when I say public servants, I mean both bureaucrats as well as political persons,
yes,
do not get inhibited in taking decisions.
And you think that has happened?
So I have a feeling that not only I think it is happening, I have a lot of colleagues who really express a lot of difficulty, especially I find it in procurement matters number of senior IAS officers who are my colleagues have come to me and asked me, how will this particular decision be interpreted?
Mr. Subramanian, that is a serious matter. This is a serious matter. I'm sure you agree with that.
We're not discussing a simple issue here. This is issue, the crux of governance, quality governance is here. I think people don't criticize the CBI. I have not seen a single state CBCID case where the state CBCID has, in any matter with any political sensitivity, has found something wrong with what the state has done. One may not take such a strong view with regard to CBI in Delhi, but the fact is its nexus with Delhi, the suspicion is not so much on the expertise side, which has been stressed. The suspicion is on the motivation or the way, the sort of predilection, how it will go, number two. Number three, I am finally convinced, 35 years later, if the intentions are correct, if you boldly put down all that you feel is correct there, I don't see you really, how many people really have come to harm? You just please count in the last 50, 60, 70 years who you can say have been railroaded into a false charge.
Sanjay?
Yeah.
You don't think there are people who have been railroaded, but do you agree with Mr. Subramanian that it is just a very small number, so there is no need for us to have a relook or change that?
I entirely agree with the entire drift of the discussion. There is no reason for bureaucrats to fear if they are on the right and if their intentions are honorable. But we must also see the context in which things are happening in the last 10, 15 years since you had, since 1991, since the time, country became liberalized. The power of the corporate sector has become far bigger and the state is on the retreat. And most of the time, public servants are disconnected with the policy changes that are taking place in terms of privatization, in terms of selling natural resources, in terms of many, many things that are happening. And the stakes are so high that the private sector, which is going to benefit, is leaning on government organizations. So invariably, I think many of the bureaucrats are not able to withstand the pressure of big money, and they give way. Similarly with politicians, similarly with bureaucrats. And that is where I think the state's weakness is causing all the problems that are happening. They are not able to provide the necessary strength for them to stand up. And many of the people who take some honest decisions, they are the ones who suffer the most, who don't enjoy the protection of the corporate houses or the people who bribe around and make changes in policy issues and all that.
Okay. Finally, Mr. Rao, so you stick to the original stand that there is no need for any amendments to this law?
For this reason, for the reason given, I don't think we require any change in the law. And the courts are always very clear in their mind. If two views are possible in a given situation, one in favor of the public servant, another against him, the courts will always give benefit of doubt to the public servant.
Okay.
So that also we have to keep in mind.
Okay,
Firstly,
Mr.
no
Tulsi.
honest man is to be punished. Second, if there is any doubt, it will be resolved.
Mr. Tulsi?
You see, I have no doubt that the clause of 13(1)(d) that we are talking about definitely does require dishonest intention, because there's a rule of interpretation like adjustum generis.
Okay.
It is found in the company of other clauses, all of which talk about the dishonest intention, and there cannot be a penal offense which does not have mens rea specifically excluded.
Okay.
I think that if anybody was to read this clause to say that dishonest intention is not an ingredient of this offense, then this offense is liable to be declared unconstitutional.
Okay.
And there is no amendment needed.
Okay.
Yeah,
Very quickly, sir.
Go along. The dishonesty need not necessarily be financial dishonesty, as I said earlier. It can be intellectual dishonesty, number one. Number two, the law has to give primacy to public interest.
Mr. Balwinder Singh?
I think what Mr. Tulsi is saying is very right. The dishonest intention, mens rea, is bound to be a requirement. But question is of interpretation of...
That is right. That is, I think that is where the finance minister is taking, maybe speaking. Maybe we'll see him articulate his opinion a little further in the coming days, but we'll have to wait and watch whether actually there needs to be an amendment or not. This will be a debate which will continue. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, the big picture, same time tomorrow.